Merrit, thank you, of course, for being here. It is a pleasure. Um, Let me say something about Marathon. Marathon is a trustee and instructor of Urantia University Institute. He co-founded the Boulder School for Students of the Urantia Book with John Hay in the early 1980s, and at that time began recording one of the published audio versions of the Urantia Book. He has served as an associate trustee of Urantia Foundation and as a general council member of the Urantia Book Fellowship. He has also served for many years on the Standard Reference Text Committee, a project jointly sponsored by the Foundation and the Fellowship, and for that reason is intimately familiar with the various typographical issues in the book. He an admittedly obscure branch of the Urantia Book Scholarship. He is currently working on the first of a series of courses for Urantia University Institute on the conversation between revelation and evolution, and a book about biblical gospels and part 4 of the Urantia book. He's also the author of Call of the Spirit, and Merrit is theoretically retired and lives in Boulder, Colorado, with his dear wife, Jeannie. So, Merrit, and it's all yours, and so you can start.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And that was, you can ignore all that you just heard about my bio. I made it up. That's actually Dana's bio. Anyway, if audio starts getting screwy or something, wave like crazy. But hopefully everything will be fine. Today, we're going to be talking about, the title of this is The Retold Story of Jesus. And for any of you who, most of you are probably familiar with the fact that there's, that book has just come out called The Untold Story of Jesus. Let me start my little thing here. Okay, can you see that? Yeah, looks like, hopefully you can see The Retold Story of Jesus, right? Okay, good. Here is this is the wonderful book that's just come out, which if you're not familiar with it, it's fabulous. It not only has the entire story from part 4 of the Urantia book in the words of the Urantia book, but it's full of wonderful art, both newly commissioned by Mo and Jennifer Siegel and classical works. It's just wonderful. And of course, what it does is show people, all the stuff in the Urantia book that's not in the Bible that people wouldn't know about. And of course, all of us are so familiar with that. That's what's so wonderful about the Urantia book. It's got all the missing years. It's got so many additional stories. It even tells us what Jesus is thinking while he's telling a story and gives the context for it, which is, of course, one of the most important things when you're trying to, connect the two. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit is the part of the story of Jesus that's retold in the Urantia book. There's, as you know, there's a lot of the Bible in the Urantia book. And that's because, let's pull this up. Oh, okay. Normally I would have Dana read this, but who knows what might happen. And I'm sorry to pick on you, Dana, but there you go. So we're going to have a lot of visuals and a bit of reading, but this is the most dense it gets. And I just want to read this because, of course, the revelators say they use the Gospels in preparing the Urantia book. And so I just want to review real quick what they say. This is both from paper 121. As far as possible, consistent with our mandate, we've endeavored to utilize and to some extent coordinate the existing records having to do with the life of Jesus on Urantia. Although we've enjoyed access to the lost record of the Apostle Andrew and have benefited from the collaboration of a vast host of celestial beings who were on Earth during the times of Michael's bestowal, notably his now personalized adjuster, it has been our purpose to make use of the so-called Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I'm not going to read the rest of that because that's just going to be too much reading. So so we know that all of us are familiar with the fact that there's Gospels used by the Urantia book, but generally I think that we don't know how they're used really. There's familiar stories, and we focus a lot on what the differences are. Well, it doesn't have, the Urantia book explains that there is no doctrine of the atonement, that this shouldn't be about Jesus, it should be the religion of Jesus, those kinds of things, which are, of course, true. But what I want to talk about today and demonstrate, more than talk, and then lots of questions if you'd like, is that the revelateurs not only present what's new, but they really tie in what they have used with the gospel record. And in ways that until I looked at it, I really didn't realize what they were doing. And I think that what they were doing, and I'll show this, is really fascinating and brings up a whole lot of questions related to, well, how did they want the revelation to connect with Christianity? Did they want it to? Or is this just, we know that Christianity went off on the wrong course, we've left it, and we're moving on, and there's some familiar figures. What were they trying to do? So I want to show this, and again, I don't have I don't have all the answers here on this by any means, but I think that it's so worth thinking about, because it's not generally, for many of us, where we go. Again, we focus on the differences, we focus on what new things the Urantia book brings to Christianity, or to everybody, not just Christianity, and don't think so much about the connections and what maybe the authors were trying to do. So that's what we're going to show. I really apologize to the Spanish speakers. This is going to get to be a little hard to follow. I apologize, especially since most of it is just English stuff. So hopefully it'll be okay, and we'll run through it. So the first thing that's interesting is, even though the Gospels are, of course, a lot shorter than part 4, they're maybe a fifth as long. And by the way, in this, I'm talking about the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, not the rest of the New Testament, which, for those of you who've spent any time with the Bible, most of the New Testament is Paul. And that's where the majority, almost all of the misinterpreted teachings are, where the atonement doctrine comes in, and the focus on Jesus as a figure, as opposed to his teachings. There's a teeny bit of that in the Gospels, but really not much. And so that's why, we're going to just look at the Gospels here and look at how much is in there and what's going on. So anyway, so about 75% of the papers in part 4 have at least something in them that's told in the Gospels, which is a bit surprising. What's more surprising is about 95% of the Gospels are found in part 4. So the Gospels may make up a fairly small portion, very small portion of part 4. They're scattered throughout, and almost all of the Gospels are found in the Urantia book. So now, of course, so there are parallels in there are sections in the Gospels that are the same. So the same story is told several times in the Gospels, and that's, well, we'll get into that another time. So first, I'm going to real quick I want to show you what the revelateurs were up against here. If they were going to use the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, here's what they've got. They're starting to tell their story in the 1920s, right? And the Bibles available to them to that point in English were a little old-fashioned, and I'll show you what's going on here. We're going to look at a couple of Bibles from the New Testament, from the King James tradition, if you will. Just a couple of verses, just to give you a sense of how this flows, okay? And this little story that we're going to do is the conclusion of the story about the foolish rich man, who builds barns and all this stuff and thinks, okay, I'm all set. And it actually is a lead-in to the part that we're going to look at in much greater detail. So this is the old, he says to his soul, soul, you're rich, and goes on from there. All right, here's what happens. Here's how that story is told in English. Here's how it evolves. In 1626, you can see this is not early modern either. This is a transition between Old English and early modern. And I will say to my soul, soul, thou hast much goods laid up in store for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, thou soul, this night will they fetch away thy soul again from thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is it with him that gathereth riches and is not rich in God. Yeah, we sort of get the point, right? And it's interesting how you can see, oh, I know where it went. Okay, here's the Geneva Bible, just a little bit later. And you'll see that even Tyndale, for his oldness, and certainly the Geneva, much of it is reflected in the King James. So here we go in the Geneva, 1560. And I will say to my soul, soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Live at ease, eat, drink, and take thy pastime. But God said unto him, O fool, this night will they fetch away thy soul from thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is he that gathereth riches to himself and is not rich in God. Now we're starting to get a little closer, but still, probably the Urantia book authors wouldn't really want to go from this much. Now, the King James. I'm sure all of you know that the King James, even more than Shakespeare, has created modern English for all practical purposes. It is the very basis of the English language to a great degree. Of the English language, and it certainly is the direct source of the way almost all of us think of the Bible who think in English. This is kind of what's in the background of the culture, right? So here's in 1611, the great King James, and I will say to my soul, soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. We still have an awful lot of archaic words in here. So in 1881 and 1901, there were official revisions of the King James by the English churches and American scholars. They were very, very similar. Matter of fact, in this little passage next, there's only one word that's different between them, and we're not going to worry about it. Very similar. And this version is the most recent version that existed when the Urantia book was written. Okay, this is what we've got in English in the Bible for this story. And I will say to my soul, soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, thou foolish one, this night is thy soul required of thee, and the things which thou hast prepared, whose shall they be? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Now, we know that doesn't sound anything at all like the Urantia book. The Urantia book may sound a bit old-fashioned to our ears today in many places. It's very formal English, but it certainly doesn't have any of the these, thys, thines, and all the F verbs, layeth up, feedeth them, this kind of stuff. That's all gone. And of course, that's something that's easily apparent, even though sometimes the language is formal. So now we're going to look real quick at the wonderful parable that follows this story in both the Bible and the Urantia book. Consider the ravens, consider the lilies. Okay. This is, I've got 2 blanks. There we go. Now, don't worry, it's going to get bigger. This is in the Urantia book, paper 165, section 5, paragraphs 2 to 3. So I hope this is big enough to see. I'm going to read it through and just, it goes really easily here. This is Jesus speaking, of course, and he's speaking to the apostles, not to everybody, which is one thing that the Urantia book here really helps with, because in the Bible, it sounds like he's talking to everybody. And you'll see that talking to everybody, this may not be a real good idea. So he says to the apostles, "You have dedicated your lives to the ministry of the kingdom. Therefore, be not anxious or worried about the things of the temporal life, what you shall eat, nor yet for your body what you shall wear. The welfare of the soul is more than food and drink. The progress in the spirit is far above the need of raiment. When you are tempted to doubt the sureness of your bread, consider the ravens. They sow not, neither reap. They have no storehouses or barns, and yet the Father provides food for every one of them that seeks it. And of how much more value are you than many birds? Besides, all of your anxiety or fretting doubts can do nothing to supply your material needs. Which of you by anxiety can add a handbreadth to your stature or a day to your life? Since such matters are not in your hands, why do you give anxious thought to any of these problems? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. Yet I say to you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is cut down and cast into the fire, how much more shall he clothe you, the ambassadors of the heavenly kingdom, O you of little faith? It just sends chills. I love it. You know, it's just so beautiful. And of course, it's familiar. We know this is in the Bible, but maybe you haven't looked at it recently. So that's what's in the Urantia book. Now, I'm going to show you, and we're going to go through, and then I'm going to just show them in parallel, and then we'll talk. And I want to hear what you think this means. So anyway, now we're going to go to, there we go. And again, I'll bring this up closer. This is a revised American Standard Version of Luke 12, 22 to 28. The stories, by the way, in the Bible and the Urantia book, this little is told in exactly the same order. There's no missing verses in the Bible here in this that I've pulled out that, you know, are out of context, nor in the Urantia book. But from where I started there's nothing I pulled out to where we get to the end. They follow each other pretty closely. But you'll see that this language here, this biblical language, doesn't have the s, f's, these, thous, ye's, and stuff like that. And I think what it does, basically, it's a very light modernization of the American Standard, just touching on those things, you know, just getting rid of the truly archaic, but maintaining the sentence structure, the vocabulary as much as possible, and only modifying that stuff when the order of the English language in the Bible is just really hard to figure out. So, but generally, this is very light revision, and that's what we've got here. So, this is from this Revised American Standard, and this is what I'm doing for this second book that was mentioned earlier. It's still a ways out here, but I'm doing this for the whole gospel, for all the Gospels, and parallel it with the Urantia book. So, here's what we have, modernizing the American Standard just a bit. And he said to his disciples, "Therefore, I say to you, be not anxious for your life, what you shall eat, nor yet for your body, what you shall put on. For the life is more than food, and the body is more than raiment. Consider the ravens, that they sow not, neither reap. They have no storehouses nor barn, and God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a cubit to his stature?" Here, I'm going to stop for a second. I told you about the English Revised and the American Standard. Here's one of the little changes that were made between the two versions. The cubit to his stature, the American scholars like, whereas to the measure of his life is what the English scholars liked. And matter of fact, through the translations through the years, you'll kind of see this flipping back and forth. But anyway, that's what the two translations are doing that are the most recent ones. One has at a cubit to his stature, another has at a cubit to the measure of his life. If then you are not able to do even that which is least, why are you anxious concerning the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. Yet I say to you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass in the field, which today is alive, and tomorrow is cast into the oven, how much more shall he clothe you, O you of little faith? So that's what the Bible has for this next section. Now we're going to go in and look and see, what did the revelators do? Okay, one, they modernized that American Standard just a little bit. It's no question. Okay, they don't use archaic language except extremely rarely. But I think you may be surprised at not only did they tell the story, but as you may have gotten a sense, they used the language. So this is, again, we'll zoom in. Here we are, no sense looking at that. Here are the two side by side. Now, of course, the first one, you've dedicated your lives to the ministry of the king. The Urantia book is in black. And he said to his disciples, well, this is one of the main differences, actually, because just before this, Jesus has said, now my message to you, apostles, is going to be a little different than it is to the rest of them. Before we get into this any further, oops, okay. You can recognize, we talked about the lilies and the ravens, that if this was a message to everybody, that it might lead people to think, I don't need to worry. I'm just going to do I'm just going to spend my life in fellowship with my friends, and we're going to talk about the gospel of Jesus, and that's all we're going to do, and God will provide. Well, if you'll recall, that is, in fact, exactly what the community in Jerusalem did. They misapplied this message to the apostles because it's recorded in here. And, well, this was before the writing of the Gospels, but they misapplied this message to everybody. And so everybody sold all their goods. We're going to rely on God to take care of us, just as the ravens and the lilies. And as the Urantia book tells us, it wasn't very long before the Christians in Antioch were having to take up collections to keep the people in Jerusalem from starving. So this is one of those places where the Urantia book, it may not differ by much, but the difference is critical, the context for what this is about. Now we'll get on. Okay, so the Urantia book again, therefore be not anxious or worried about the things of the temporal life. The Bible, therefore I say to you, be not anxious for your life. Pretty close. Now it starts to get a little more interesting. Both of them, what you shall eat, nor yet for your body, what you shall wear or put on. Word for word. Okay, a little, if we notice, probably in the Urantia book, it seemed a little old-fashioned, but just beautiful, and it is. Okay, and it's exactly the way it is. Then the Urantia book, again, fills in a bit more. The welfare of the soul is more than food and drink, and the progress of the spirit is far above the need of raiment. Whereas the Bible simply says, for life is more than food, and the body is more than raiment. The vocabulary is the same, but the Urantia book is added quite a bit. Then the Urantia book says, when you're tempted, Jesus says, you're tempted to doubt the sureness of your bread, consider the ravens. And now watch how this follows almost, they sow not, neither reap. They have no storehouses or barns. And yet the Father provides food for every one of them, and God feeds them. And of how much more value are you than any birds? Oops, I think I probably just went too far. Hold on. Besides, all of your anxiety or fretting doubts can do nothing to supply your material needs. Which of you, by anxiety, can add a handbreadth to your stature or a day to his life? And of course, the Bible says, and which of you, by being anxious, can add a cubit to his stature or, in the American Standard Version, to the measure of his life? Since such matters are not in your hands, if then you're not able to do even that which is least, why do you give anxious thought to any of these problems? Why are you anxious concerning the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. Yet I say to you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today, and tomorrow is cut down and cast into the fire, how much more shall he clothe you, the ambassadors of the heavenly kingdom, O you of little faith? So I don't know about you, but I was frankly stunned when I realized that the beautiful language in the Urantia book comes so much and directly from simply modernizing the most recent translation of the Bible a little bit. So the question is, they didn't have to do this. And I think most of us think they didn't, right? Most of us think, well, the Urantia book, since they were there, they would have taken the words of Jesus and translated them up probably from Aramaic. This certainly would have been in Aramaic because he was talking to all the apostles. And I know you remember that the Alphaeus twins couldn't speak Greek. And so he was speaking in Aramaic here. Or maybe the revelators went back to the original Greek. Okay, and that's, they used the Greek New Testaments. Well, they certainly could have, but they didn't, because there are many different ways of translating these passages into English, or of course into any language. Languages don't have a word for word correspondence. This is much more structured like the Greek is than much more modern translations, because Greek tends to be structured a little different. But still, they could have, if they went from the Greek, they could have corrected some stuff in the translations, and they could have, gone from there. They didn't do that either. So they didn't create their own translation. They didn't go whether from Aramaic or Greek. We don't have the Aramaic, by the way. But we do know, of course, that where Andrew was used, and we don't know where that is, they had to have gone from presumably Greek or possibly Aramaic from his writings, because they had that. But look at this, what's available in English, they have actually taken as is, in the most familiar possible language to Christians on earth already, right? They haven't just told the same story. They are using the language from the Bible to tell the story from the Bible. I just find that completely unexpected. But this isn't the only instance. In fact, this is how they use the Bible throughout, and that's what I'm going to show as part of the book. So to me, I'm going to stop sharing here because I could talk a lot, but I don't want any more. Was stunned by this. And I think that it really starts to, the way authors write the way they do because they want to, right? Authors make choices. They're trying to tell stories or enumerate facts or whatever it might be, but they make the choices about language because of their purpose. And some of that is strictly obvious, like the poetry of these passages. I mean, some things are just beautiful, and this is a beautiful story. They don't just want to chop it out here in word for word or something like that, or even thought for thought. This is a beautiful passage. And it can be beautiful in any number of ways of translating it, some of which might be a little more accurate. So why would they do this? Okay, why would they pull this beautiful language not just out of the air, but right out of the Christian tradition? Just so much that if somebody opened the Bible next to it and opened this, they would see, wow. And so my thesis here is, and I'd like to now open it up for questions, is that the writers, the revelators, were doing a lot more than we think they were, perhaps, or that we commonly do with part 4. with how they're telling the life of Jesus. They weren't just telling us new things. They weren't just clarifying what we've gotten wrong. They weren't just refocusing the stories. They were connecting directly with the tradition that exists, with the very translation tradition that has created the English language itself. They have tied that in just as clearly as they might. And I think that why would they do that? What are they trying to tell us? Are they trying to tell us that we should all run around and say, no, we're not Christians. Christianity's gotten everything wrong. Read the Urantia book and you'll see. Or maybe something else. So that's what I've got. Hey, Mo, I hope you were here for my laudatory words about your book earlier, because, you know, it's just phenomenal. And of course, it goes a long way toward showing this. The work that I'm doing off on the side that you guys will see later is ridiculously academic, but I hope it will be very helpful for Urantia book readers especially. I think we need to know this stuff, but also for people who read the Bible. Mo, you have put up your electronic hand, I see. And now, by the way, if anybody wants a question, it will help if you use your electronic hand, because there's a lot of people here and I can't see everybody at once. But I'll try to scroll through, and I will rely on people like Stuart and Dana and Bennett to tell me if somebody else is waving around there, if you would, please. Yes, Mo.
Well, I don't have a question. I just have a few quick comments. Thank you for your kind words about the Untold story. It was a real joy, and Stuart's on this call, and he helped do it. I think what you just said is excellent, Merrit. And it's so revealing. And sometimes you hear people condemn Christianity. That's not what the Urantia revelation did at all. And you can imagine the angels of the churches saying, we want this familiar. Christianity already believes in Jesus. And I think about paper one for me. When I read paper one, I knew the Bible enough to recognize a lot of the quotes. And it was familiar to me. And I was willing to keep going with the Urantia book because it felt familiar. And at the beginning of each chapter of the Untold story, we put in a Bible quote at the top of it. And we did it on purpose so people felt comfortable with what was going to be said. We also took paintings. We did a lot of paintings, 45, but we also took a lot of paintings that felt familiar. And we've noticed with the Untold story, which is what I'd hoped, that the familiarity would make them be willing to take a look at the Urantia revelation. And the last point is this quote: what a transcendent service if, through this revelation, the Son of Man should be recovered from the tomb of traditional theology and presented as the living Jesus to the church that bears his name and all other religions. So what you've pointed out is so important in understanding part 4, understanding the whole revelation. Thank you, Merrit.
Oh, my pleasure. And of course, I agree. I agree with you and with myself. Thank you, Mo. I also wanted to, I was going to say something before Kurt came in, but of course it slipped my mind. So it'll come back. Kurt, I see your hand up.
Well, thank you. You are not the first person that's recognized this by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, there is a whole school of ministry for Urantia book readers dedicated to making this bridge between Christianity and the Urantia book. And it's called the Christ Experiment School of Ministry. And I would urge anyone who's interested in learning how to use the Bible to bridge over to the Urantia book to help Christians make that leap that for us, some of us came kind of easily and naturally, but for others, they have to overcome their current doctrinal mindset in order to do that. And the Christ Experiment School is designed to help us do that. So I would urge you to go to thechristexperiment.org, and you can click on the school and learn about how to get involved with it, because it's an excellent program. I just graduated as a spiritual life coach from it last week. So I can attest to the fact that it's a really good program, probably the most organized program I've ever seen in the Urantia book movement as far as teaching. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm what you know. They do have a great program, and you're right. People have seen the connection before, but what was so stunning to me is the language itself. They are not just saying, "Hey, connect on to Christianity." They're exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Oh, ye of little faith. Okay. That's a pretty archaic phrase. Would we say that today, walking down the street? Oh, ye of little faith, trust in God. No, probably not. But that's what they said in the Urantia book. Why the heck? They didn't just tell the story. And again, of course, the quotes in the Untold story show this. And again, you have to be shown in the end. This is just a little bit, but it's everywhere. And you'll see it. So thanks. Yes. Lots of people have done it. This is hopefully another little tool and another idea. The revelateurs really did mean this. It's not just a feature of their teaching. It's central. I know. The thing was, one of the things we think, the Gospels have such shortfalls and all this. You realize, wait a minute. They don't. All the screwy theology and stuff, again, tends to be in Paul. But you realize, what were the gospel writers couldn't get into Jesus's mind. They didn't know what he was thinking or why he was doing it, unless they remembered exactly what he said. And of course, that's what in the Urantia book is so enlightening. When he told this story, why was he telling it? What was he trying to do? And so you realize that the shortcomings of the Bible, of the Gospels, are completely natural. They don't come from some intentional theological move. They didn't have access to what he was thinking. They didn't know some of the setup, which is just critical. And again, that's where the Urantia book, by filling in exactly as it does, where it does, how it does, shows so much more. Oh, now I get it. And so anyway, thank you. I've got Collins Lomo. I don't know Collins Lomo. I know that's probably not right name. Who please? Speak
Hello.
up.
Yeah.
Hi.
Merrit, this is Collins, and it's nice seeing you here again. I remember listening to you at the cafe
Yes.
organized by the Urantia University Institute. And then one more thing, your screensaver of the doctor from the Back to the Future just knocks me out, something. And I love it, And thank you for this wonderful presentation because it sheds light on something that recently I thought about, and it involves taking the Urantia book out there. We're readers and we are very few, but we know the majority of people perhaps that we have to influence people in the religious sect because they form the majority of people, that can use the revelation. And that thought of what they're probably going to see the Urantia book to be compared to, the scriptures and all the religious texts that they have always, been, sometimes an issue to deal with. But what you're saying sort of tells us to lighten up sometimes and not to think that many of these things are so erroneous and so bad that people who use it or read it sometimes cannot really share the truths that the Urantia book presents. But it does actually. And like you said them, at par with each other, and it tells us that, yes, we should mostly see, just as the Urantia book says it sometimes, that when we are judging some of these things in the past, we should remember and judge them according to the time and the revelation and the sort of enlightenment in their age. And I don't know whether it's from the Urantia book platform, but recently I also read something that sort of captures this, that when you're facing someone, you think that you're doing something that they could do differently. You're pretty much not going to get anywhere by just saying it in their face that, oh yeah, you're wrong, but sort of just get close to them and show them the superior way. So yeah, I like it. You never seem to disappoint me. So you always share something that keep every one of us thinking.
Well,
So yeah, good one.
thank you so much. Great to hear from you, Collins. I'm so glad your connection is this good. It's wonderful. And of course, the thing what you're saying is absolutely true. And what Kurt said, this doesn't remove the need for wisdom, though. That's what we've got to learn. How do we do this? I think the task becomes clearer, but how do we do it? What do we do? And so, anyway, thank you, Collins. Let's see, David Henry.
Great presentation, Merrit. I'm sure most of us here can recall the motive that Jesus had in wanting to teach in parables. There was a greater chance for a greater number of people to understand what it was he was trying to teach. And Merrit, what you've pointed out here is a wonderful illustration of the wisdom of Jesus wanting to do that. When you look at the non-parallel, when you look at the non-parable text, there was a lot of alteration. When you look at the parable section of the text, lilies and whatnot, it's almost verbatim. Fascinating, really fascinating. Good presentation, good point to make there. Yeah, so you can see how the continuity continued here with the parable philosophy of teaching truth through that. Beautiful, wonderful.
Yes, thank you. Good. Yes, revelation and evolution are really tightly linked. They knew what they were doing. They say it over and over again, but it really helps to see it sometimes. Thank you. Vicki.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I was interested in this workshop because I've been working on a children's curriculum for quite a while now, and I'm actually going to be sending out year 4. I have 31 lessons per school year. And the stories, I call them one-page stories of Jesus, and it's basically for ages 8 through 12. That's where I'm aiming at. And the stories that I focus on are strictly the stories that are found in both the New Testament and the Urantia book. And so this is, and I've been able to find and put into my curriculum 155 of those stories. And it's been a really fun experience, and I just wanted to let you know about that, anyone here know about that in case you're interested in receiving them by email. I'll be sending out year 4 beginning in September, so you can give me a.
Wonderful.
I'll put the email address in the chat box.
Oh, great idea.
Yeah.
Everybody know how to get to the chat box and see that there's something in there. Thank you so much, Vicki. That's great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
One more creative and wise thing to do, right? Oh, wonderful. Sarah Terry.
Good morning. I just really want to thank you, Merrit, because yes, I knew the comparisons are there with the Bible and the Urantia book, but the way you have set this up has been humbling. Because at least for me, I can only speak for myself, I can really go on the, I have the Urantia book place. And I think that's one of the ways that Christianity kind of turned a negative corner, was the superiority, that they had something that other people didn't have. And I just feel like I personally need to be very cautious of doing so. And that people who are reading the Bible are getting what they need to get out of it, possibly, and that, yes, there's more. And what the Urantia book has provided me, I'm not downgrading that at all. My goodness, it's changed my life. But to maybe just recognize the similarities, and that we're all on this path, and that, all the universe is taking us on this path, and the Urantia is part of the path, but it's not supposed to be a superiority, us versus them thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, no, it does. Thank you so much. Mo, you know the statistic. How many Urantians are there, and how many Christians are there?
Well, there's 2.5 billion Christians, And there's about as many Urantians as to fill up 3 or 4 buses.
Oh, okay.
No, not really, because we sold 20,000 Urantia books last year at Urantia Foundation and had about 100,000 downloads.
Wow. Wow.
And I forgot the number of visits to Urantia Foundation's website and Truth Books as well. And they're big numbers.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Now, how many people actually read the book is a different topic. It's not so easy.
No, but it's a great doorstop. Back to Sarah's point, and again, the connection, to focus, and I would encourage anybody wants to focus on the Gospels. Focus on the Gospels. That's where you'll see all of this. You know, Paul did wonderful things, but that's where the theology gets messed up. And there's wonderful stuff back there, but if you can share in the Gospels, you'll find that almost anything you find in the Gospels is going to be found in the Urantia book, and it's darn close. And what you may get from the Urantia book is something that can expand on it a little bit. Well, here, maybe Jesus was meaning this. What do you think? You know, stuff that's just a natural lead-in. But again, Paul's a great guy. You don't need to read him. Focus on the Gospels. It's just wonderful. Kingsley, Nigeria.
Good afternoon.
Hi there.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kingsley Federer from Nigeria. I got the link to this conference from Collins, the guy from Ghana. I've been reading the Urantia book for over 10 years, and I must say, when I first started to read, after my first read, I had this burning fire. I wanted everyone around me to learn what I've just gotten to know. It wasn't strange, but it was coming from too far away. And it was very good. So I wanted to share. But perhaps I didn't know how to share properly, or I don't know, maybe I shared wrongly. But it ended up putting me in a difficult position, in a very tight situation. I was almost going to be considered a religious reprobate. How could you say stuff that are against what we consider to be the final complete word of God, that is the Bible? And just listening to the last bits of our discussion here, I have this strong feeling. I remember how I felt initially about sharing. I understand the challenges of passing this information across. And just like we got to know a while ago, there are about 5 billion Christians and maybe just a city full of Urantians on the planet. It's going to be difficult for us to make a very, very fast traction, I believe. But at the same time, just like the book pointed out, even if we don't do anything, the concept, the ideal of the whole thing has within itself to come up to fruition in time. But I want to know if we are going to share this message, this gospel, to the Christians out there, because after a while, I started to consider myself not a Christian. I thought of myself as just being a child of God. I don't want to mix things up, because if I say I'm a Christian and I say I don't believe this, which is in the Bible, the Christian book, then who am I really? I mean, that's just a digress. So my point is, what value can we show to the Christians, the Christian groups, that the Urantia book is bringing to the table? Because like, if I can remember her name, she spoke just before me, I guess, Sarah Teddy or something. I can't remember, I'm sorry if I called it wrongly. Like she pointed out, I'm sorry, I just forgot the point I was just going to make. But like I was trying to say, we need to be sure that we are actually bringing some value to the Christians, because they think they have it all. What they already have is working. The Bible is taking people to heaven. The Bible is getting people's mind open so that they can get healings and deliverance. The Bible is effective, but we know it's not good enough. So how is it that we can pass this message across and get something to happen within a very short time? Thank you.
That's the question, Kingsley. I think the problem is the short time, but no, you're exactly right. And I think in 2 seconds, and then I'm going to get to Bennett. One, we've got to remember Jesus's technique of he never once, and this is a tour of the Roman world and in Rome, so this is a specific thing, never once talked about the errors of the other people. He focused on what was true and enlarged it. And knowing this about, we don't have to fight against the atonement doctrine or something like that. You can talk about your personal relationship with Jesus and how you've gained inspiration from this story or that story. And of course, you know a bit more about this story or that story because of the Urantia book, and maybe can fill that out a little bit. I think that we've just tended to be very defensive about our theology, which is, you know, I mean, understandable, right? But problematic, you know. You know, just a quick thought. We're getting toward the end. I want Bennett to, and then we've got another hand or two here. That I look at while I love the first 3 parts of the book, I mean, I've spent most of my time there. I'm not somebody who's spent all my time in part 4, but I really look at the rest of the book in a way that tells us the universe that Jesus is coming from. That tells us who this God is that he's speaking about and what this universe is that we're at home in. That's what's going on there. That's the context for his life that we don't know in the Bible. But is it essential? You know, we have to say, oh, by the way. No, of course not. Just like we don't have to say, oh, by the way, that atonement doctrine of yours, God would never do that. Well, of course, God would never do that. But if we focus on the personal relationship with Jesus, that will crowd that out, because certainly that's true for you. Bennett.
So we have time for one question.
Okay, all right. Thanks for keeping us on track there. Okay.
Well, that lets me off the hook because I'm not going to ask a question, but I'm going to thank you, Merrit, for your definitive service here today, and suggest to anyone present with us that if you haven't read at least the first couple pages of the foreword in a recent period, take another look at it while Merritt's thoughts are still fresh on your mind. I'm going to read 2 sentences. But our mandate admonishes us to make every effort to convey our meanings by using the word symbols of the English tongue. We have been instructed to introduce new terms only when the concept to be portrayed finds no terminology in English which can be employed to convey such a new concept partially, or even with more or less distortion of meaning, which is actually hysterical to me at this late date. But I would suggest to those of you engaging in conversations with people not familiar with these teachings, that questions such as, well, what do you think Jesus meant by that? Rather than saying that their concept is wrong. Tell me more about what Jesus might have meant. And as soon as that individual runs to the end of their knowledge base, they're much more open to something you might have to say, but be gentle. And the other thing is, and this one's dicey, you got to be pretty far in a conversation, but I sometimes say to people, do you think they'll preach from the Bible in heaven? There's not an answer to that. There's not an answer to it. You're not going to give them the answer, but it's just to make them think, because we're all humble before God, and there's more to know, and there's more to do. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bennett. I think that image is what we can take away. And thank you so much, everyone. Really enjoyed it, and hope we've helped a little bit. And if you don't have Untold Story of Jesus, get it. And it's going to be another year or so before I get my book out. Then I want you to buy that too. David, I'm sorry we're not going to, I think, be able to get to you. And I know Irma had her hand up, but I have been admonished by Antonio that my time is at an end here today.
Yes.
So thank you so much. Wonderful seeing all of you.